time, and we're eager to answer your questions. In just a few minutes, we'll be hearing from Congresswoman Clark and our two panelists about the first year of the IRA, and then we will open up the program to pre-submitted and live questions from constituents. If you have a question at any point in the program, please press 0 on your keypad, and a member of our team will put you into the queue. While we wait for participants to get on the line, I just want to remind folks that we'll be discussing both the healthcare and climate provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act. So we ask callers to do their best to keep the questions focused on that topic. We have a lot to cover about this legislation, and we want to try to get to as many questions as possible. So once again, if you have a question, please press 0 on your keypad, and a member of our team will put you in the queue. And if you need help with a federal agency or have a question about a different policy topic, please don't hesitate to call our district office at 617-354-0292, and a member of our team will be happy to assist you. Again, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And now I will turn it over to Congresswoman Clark.
Thank you so much, Kelsey, and good evening, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Katherine Clark, and I am so proud to represent you in the U.S. House of Representatives. And I am thrilled to have you on this telephone town hall. Tonight, we will be discussing the Inflation Reduction Act. It is an important law that is lowering health care and energy costs right here in the 5th District. This really is a game-changing law that was enacted 1 year ago. It was built on a straightforward idea. We don't grow the economy by growing billionaires' bank accounts. We grow the economy by growing the middle class. And here's how the Inflation Reduction Act is making that happen. First, it's bringing down the cost of insurance premiums, expanding access to tax credits that can put you toward a quality marketplace plan. And now more Americans than ever before have access to affordable health coverage. Second, it is bringing down the cost of prescription drugs. It caps insulin costs at $35 a month for seniors on Medicare. It caps seniors' out-of-pocket expenses at $2,000 per year. And it empowers Medicare to negotiate prices with drug companies. The third important part of this legislation is that it is cutting energy bills. It is saving Bay Staters money on their utilities while lowering the cost of electric vehicles, energy-efficient appliances, and home upgrades. Finally, it is addressing the urgent and security threats posed by a changing climate, all while creating good-paying, clean energy jobs across Massachusetts. Altogether, the Inflation Reduction Act is building a more secure, more sustainable future while making sure families have a little more breathing room in their budget at the end of the month. And tonight, we are so fortunate to be joined by two leaders from the Biden-Harris administration. First is Maria Robinson from the Department of Energy, and also Everett Hanford from the Department of Health and Human Services. Maria and Everett and some of their teams are here to explain how these cost-cutting provisions work and how you can take advantage of them. Most importantly, the three of us are here to answer your questions, some of which you have already submitted and we'll be getting to shortly. And if you didn't have a chance and would like to ask a question, just press 0 to join the queue. So now I'd like to turn the floor over to Maria Robinson, who is the Director of Grid Deployment at the U.S. Department of Energy. Maria previously represented Framingham as the Massachusetts State Representative, and now she's leading the administration's work to modernize the U.S. power grid and deliver more reliable, more affordable electricity to your home. Maria, thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. And as always, it's lovely to be back. I'm actually physically back in the 5th Congressional District in my home here in Framingham. So as mentioned, I run the Grid Deployment Office out of the Department of Energy. And so we are one of the many new offices set up specifically in light of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act to help deploy as much clean energy and all the other energy technologies necessary to get us to a modern grid that meets all of our electricity needs while also helping to decarbonize the system overall. We are part of a whole group of offices under the Undersecretary of Infrastructure that are charged with putting out billions and billions of dollars to help to continue to invest in our infrastructure, as well as make sure that we're providing appropriate funding for rebates on different appliances, which is a program that has recently launched that we're particularly excited about here. While my particular office focuses on the important component of large-scale transmission and distribution work, as well as some around hydropower, I'm happy when we get to the question and answer portion to talk about any questions that you might have about the department as a whole, and we'll do my best to answer those. Up front, I strongly encourage everyone on the call to check out the Energy Savings Hub, which is something that we're really proud of here at the Department of Energy. And that has been put together to help consumers better understand all of their energy choices, as well as some of the many benefits available to them through the Inflation Reduction Act and other acts of Congress. You can find this Energy Savings Hub at energy.gov/save, which is pretty easy to remember. And that provides some information for you, whether you are a homeowner, whether you're a renter, someone who drives, and helps you to better understand which specific tax credits and rebates might be applicable to your circumstances. It might inspire you to consider other options that you haven't before, whether it's taking on heat pumps, which our family actually recently purchased last year as well. So we have a wide range of tools here available to us at the Department of Energy, and we're really excited in particular for Massachusetts. We recently released funding about the rebates for home energy efficiency and home electrification and appliance rebates, each fund of which totals about $73 million that will be given to folks in Massachusetts for a total of about $146 million. So that's really exciting. We're looking forward for the Department of Energy to work closely with Governor Healy and her staff in order to implement these programs so that you all will be able to start claiming your rebates in the relatively near future. So we're thrilled to be a part of today's town hall representing the Department of Energy. I will also note that there are lots of other departments doing incredible work, whether it's USDA over at the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Interior, so many different areas, and our friends, of course, at the Department of Transportation, with whom we're working very closely on electric vehicle charging and infrastructure. And all of these have been terrific partners. And I know that we have other great folks who are working on other aspects of the Inflation Reduction Act with us here today. And I'm personally looking forward to learning more about those components that I don't spend as much time on every day. So I'm happy to turn it back over to you, Congresswoman, and hear from the other guests.
Thank you so much, Maria. We are thrilled to have you, and thanks already for that information on the Energy Savings Hub, and we'll go back over that. In case you are just dialing in, we're discussing how the Inflation Reduction Act is bringing down costs for Massachusetts families. If you have a question for us, just press 0 to join the queue. And now we're going to hear how Democrats are saving Bay Staters on one of their biggest budget lines, and that's health care. I'm going to turn it over to the Department of Health and Human Services leader on the ground right here in New England, Regional Director Everett Hanford. Everett, thank you for joining us, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Good evening, everyone. My name is Everett Hanford, and I have the privilege to serve as the Region 1 Director for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services of New England, which encompasses the 6 New England states and the 10 federally recognized tribes. Our regional office serves as a hub to hear and relay concerns that you may have for our Health and Human Services Secretary, Javier Becerra. I certainly want to thank my colleagues who are joining me this evening, Mr. Joe Stone and Mr. Mike Miller from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. They are thrilled to be here this evening and will also participate by helping to answer questions that you may have. Thank you to all of our attendees for joining us this evening, and most importantly, thank you to our fearless and courageous leader, Congresswoman Katherine Clark, and her entire team for convening this evening's meeting. Many things that one could admire about this trailblazer, but what I adore the most about our dear Congresswoman is her relentless, unwavering support to prioritize families first. And because of this fundamental principle that Congresswoman Clark lives by each and every day, when she goes to vote for us in Washington, our country was able to take a significant step forward in our commitment to achieving health equity by voting to pass the Inflation Reduction Act. More than 5 million people with Medicare struggle to afford prescription drugs. We've all heard abhorrent stories, or perhaps you have personally experienced situations where prescription drugs are so high that seniors are forced to choose whether or not they should purchase the medication they need and deserve or pay for the food to eat for the week. We've heard from advocates who have shared stories of people with disabilities who are left in financial ruin simply by trying to access the care that meets their basic needs. The Inflation Reduction Act provides meaningful financial relief for millions of people with Medicare by improving access to affordable treatments and strengthening the Medicare program, both now and in the long run. Its benefits are cascading and being felt by millions of Americans across the country. And this evening, I want to briefly walk through some of the key health provisions of this legislation. The Inflation Reduction Act has several provisions designed to save individuals and families hundreds of dollars. First, it lowers Medicare prescription drug costs by placing a $35 out-of-pocket cap per month supply of each covered insulin picked up at the pharmacy. The provision has gone into effect as of January 1st of this year, and as of last month, the cap will also apply to a month's worth of supply for insulin that is used through the traditional pump. Secondly, it lowers out-of-pocket costs. Starting in 2025, people with Medicare prescription drug coverage won't pay any more than $2,000 out of pocket for prescription drugs a year and will be adjusted annually for inflation. The Inflation Reduction Act also eliminates the catastrophic phase in Part D. Starting in January of 2024, people with Medicare prescription drug coverage who fall into the catastrophic phase of the prescription drug benefit won't have to pay any co-insurance or co-payments during that phase for covered Medicare prescription drugs. This means reduced costs for people with very high prescription drug costs, such as people with cancer, multiple sclerosis, and other catastrophic illnesses. The Inflation Reduction Act strengthens Medicaid and CHIP by guaranteeing adults in Medicaid will receive recommended vaccinations at no charge. Some of these recommended vaccinations include the Tdap, whooping cough, pneumonia, and shingles vaccine, just to name a few. The Inflation Reduction Act furthermore expanded the low-income subsidy. Federal assistance for low-income individuals with Medicare Part D will now be expanded lowering premiums and reducing copays for eligible enrollees starting in 2024. And finally, it allows CMS to negotiate prescription drug prices. By September 1st of this year, CMS will publish the first 10 Medicare Part D drugs selected for negotiations. The negotiated maximum fair prices for these 10 drugs will be announced by September 1st of 2024, so the following year. And prices will be in effect starting in January of 2026. In future years, CMS will select for negotiation 15 more Part D drugs for 2027, 15 more Part B or Part D drugs for 2028, and 20 more Part B or Part D drugs for each year after that, as outlined in the drug law. Thanks to the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, the Biden-Harris administration and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services are keeping their promise to deliver lower costs for American families so that people can access the health care that they deserve and not have to make those gut-wrenching decisions like foregoing medicine to keep food on the table. We are certainly committed to equity and equal access for all. And as Congresswoman Clark exemplifies, I'm proud to work for an organization that's putting families first. Thank you. And I turn the mic back over to you, Congresswoman.
Thank you so much, Everett. We so appreciate you being with us and all your expertise, and also Joe Stone and Mike Miller for joining us as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Kelsey, our district director here in my Massachusetts office. And Kelsey, you can get the questions started.
Fantastic. So we actually received a number of pre-submitted constituent questions. So we'll start off with those, but I just want to remind folks on the phone that if you do have a question to ask during the program, please press 0 on your keypad to be added to the queue. So one question that we got from Daniel from Medford was that the Inflation Reduction Act has been fantastic for taking initial steps in lowering out-of-pocket costs for prescriptions and healthcare premiums for folks with pre-existing conditions. The question is, how can we take this momentum and apply it to newly diagnosed diseases, increase awareness and access to more clinical trials, increase access to earlier screenings and treatments, et cetera?
Well, thank you, Daniel, for that question. And you're absolutely right. As powerful as this piece of legislation is and what it is going to offer and reduce healthcare costs in Massachusetts alone, that is an average savings of $480 a year. But we know it's just a beginning. And so I'm going to turn it over to Everett to talk about how we will be able to build on these savings and what HHS is looking towards the future.
Yes, thank you, Congresswoman. So I will say this, and thank you so much for your question. Lowering Medicare drug costs for hundreds of thousands of people from Massachusetts and across this country is something that the Biden-Harris administration is increasingly focused on throughout their tenure here. According to the projections from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, because of President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, which is a landmark law to lower prescription drug costs, about 482,000 Commonwealthers will save an average of $333 per year on prescription drug costs with these new policies in place. And this includes the $2,000 annually out-of-pocket cap on Medicare prescription drugs that goes into effect in 2025. So, I will say that the Biden-Harris administration is certainly trying to do their part to lower these drug costs for the American people and for the people of Massachusetts. Joe or Mike, is there anything else that you would like to add on to that?
So I think to address his question, with maybe a little more historical presence. I think those of you who've been in Medicare for a while know that when Medicare Part D, the prescription drug program, took effect, that was a major step forward. And each year since then, that was in 2006, each year since then, the program has improved in so many ways relative to catastrophic coverage that details like Everett mentioned earlier. And I think going forward, you're going to see this as another stepping stone to improve the Medicare program relative to prescription drugs, and especially the negotiating factor relative to pharmaceuticals as we move forward. And all of that will lead to sort of more funds in the program, more results relative to new drugs and new services that Medicare can provide. Anything else, Mike?
And just to add to that, I think it's been very thorough. So starting in April, Medicare has enforced that any Part D medications that outpace the price of inflation, the drug manufacturers must be paying rebates to Medicare. So this will definitely help drive drug prices down going forward. And these provisions are just getting started on implementation throughout the next few years, and these will definitely trickle down to really reduce beneficiaries' drug costs significantly.
Great. So the next question was submitted from Ron from Framingham, directed more at Maria. Ron says, my electric bill in Massachusetts has doubled over a 12-month period and continues to rise. We know that roughly half of New England's electricity is supplied by natural gas. How does that contribute to higher energy bills in Massachusetts? What is this legislation doing to address the energy costs that keep going up?
Absolutely. Ron. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I just wanted to say to Ron that we hear this so frequently. Electric costs are very high in Massachusetts. It is a real struggle for many families and for many businesses as we are trying to attract and keep manufacturing here in the Bay State, and really any kind of business that we are trying to keep. Utility costs is a theme that we hear that can sometimes be a barrier to growth. So, Maria, I turn it over to you to tell us how we're working on it.
Absolutely. I just got so excited because I'm hoping it's my friend Ron from Framingham as well, who I know is deeply invested in clean energy. And so, yes, we certainly hear that plenty, and hopefully, as more of the Inflation Reduction Act continues to be implemented, we'll see those costs reduced as well. And so part of the work that has going into this is happening over at the Department of Treasury right now, as they're finalizing some of the tax credit laws available under the Inflation Reduction Act. And so it is in an extension of the Clean Electricity Production Tax Credit and the Clean Electricity Investment Tax Credit that will allow for a significant amount of tax credit for developers, for utilities, to encourage them to develop more clean energy, whether that's wind, whether that's solar or geothermal. Certainly offshore wind here in Massachusetts as well as being under consideration. And one of the things that I think is really exciting about some of the tax credits that are happening over there, which is already at 30% for that investment tax credit, is that there are bonus credits that really encourage developers and utilities to do the right thing. So if you are using, for example, more domestic content, which means that some of the parts are made here in the United States, they get a better tax credit off of it. Similarly, if you're working on specific qualified low-income residential building projects, or you're doing some of the work in energy communities, whether that's a brownfield site or in low-income communities, which I know parts of Framingham are, you'll be able to qualify for even more of that tax credit. So I think we're going to see a significant shift from our own utilities of Grid and Eversource, as well as more developers entering New England who are excited to take advantage of these particular tax credits. And we're likely to see more of the existing fossil-fired fleet roll off over time.
Fantastic. So I believe we have a live question from Kay from Watertown. Kay, you are on the line.
Hello.
Hi, Kay.
Yes.
Go ahead with your question.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No problem.
If one is not eligible because of employment for Medicaid or Medicare, it doesn't seem that this act is going to have any benefit to those people.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Kay. I think this is one that a lot of people are concerned about, and we are working to expand the scope of this legislation, but I would turn it over to Everett and his team to help further explain that.
Yes, thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you, Kay, for your question. Joe, do you want to take a crack at this one?
Yeah, sure. So as you probably know, Medicare is an entitlement program. So everyone that's worked a certain amount of time in the United States is eligible, becomes entitled, for Part A, right, which we refer to simply as your hospital insurance. And Part B is something that you're eligible for after you've worked a certain number of quarters in the United States. So Medicare is available to over 60 million currently enrolled individuals in the United States. You are right, though, that Medicaid is based on your income, but the specifics that Everett and we were talking about so far are available to people in Medicare. The cap on insulin costs, the Part B caps, the price negotiations, all of those directly affect every Medicare beneficiary who's taking prescription drugs. I hope that answered your question.
And Joe, could you further explain what we saw with some of the other manufacturers of insulin and how they followed with price reduction that was driven by the Inflation Reduction Act cap for Medicare?
Mike, is that something that you can field? Or I can
sure. So the IRA has been very effective so far in reducing costs for Medicare beneficiaries. As everyone knows, insulin is incredibly expensive, and the act has reduced the co-payment to $35 for a month supply per insulin product, which has saved lots of dollars throughout the country. Additionally, all vaccines are covered. No co-payment required for any Part B vaccines. So if you're receiving those in the pharmacy, at the doctor's office, those will be no cost. Those are vaccines such as shingles, which are very commonly administered to Medicare eligible beneficiaries. And the legislation will continue to reduce costs for Medicare recipients.
It's probably also worth mentioning for your constituent that as the largest insurer in the United States, actually the largest insurer in the world, we process more claims than any other body in the world every day. That what happens in the Medicare program trickles down to people who are still working. So in the 5th District, all those people that are working are seeing, relative to insulin costs that we're specifically mentioning, seeing some changes from manufacturers, hopefully in their own employer group products. But it's a continuing effort when you're the largest insurer to makes positive inroads in healthcare to have those trickle down throughout the community.
Wonderful. Thank you. Our next question comes from Steve from Winthrop. Steve, you're on the line.
Hi, thank you. I have a question about what I read as one of the main, what stuck out to me as one of the main components of the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed last summer. It had to do with consumer rebates on heat pump installations and on consumer appliances like the electrified induction stoves and heat pump water heaters and all that. I actually canceled a scheduled installation of the heat pump in my home last summer because I wanted to put it off to be able to take advantage of the upcoming rebates, the point of sale rebates of $8,000 on the heat pump, and I think it's $840 on an induction stove. And those have yet to materialize. I understand. I've been on the Department of Energy website. I know that this is being arranged by the federal government and then ultimately to be administered by the states. But I'm wondering if anybody here has knowledge of like a timeline associated with when that is thought to be available, like when we believe that's going to be available at the consumer level. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Steve, for this question. And we know that it is disappointing that we can't yet claim those rebates, but they are underway. And Maria, any information or timeline that you can add? We know that DOE has issued application instructions for rebate funding, and that we are hoping to get this to consumers as soon as possible.
Absolutely. So just a few days ago, they released the information, or the Department of Energy released information so states could start applying for that funding from us. And as I mentioned, Massachusetts is slated to get a pretty significant amount, well over just about $150 million across a number of different home electrification and appliance-related rebates here. And so we anticipate that early next year is when the requirements are due back to DOE from the states, hoping, of course, working with states that we'll be able to get some of that information back to us even sooner to be able to get the money flowing out the door. Because we want to make sure that these programs are really thoughtful, that they're fair, that they're equitable, and considering all the different situations that people are in, that we're working with both renters as well as with homeowners, and people in a really wide variety of living situations. It's important that each state has the opportunity to really design a program that works best for them. There's certainly a greater interest in heating, for example, here in Massachusetts than there might be in other parts of the country. So while we, recognize the frustration and trust me, my colleagues over at the state community and energy programs working as fast as they possibly can to get this money out the door. We want to make sure that folks will have access to all of this funding in a really thoughtful way, and one that will ultimately be easy for you to access once it is fully available. That's why we're working so closely with our friends over at the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources. So, but I think you'll be very happy when you finally do. I have an induction stove as well as a heat pump, and I can tell you that we saved quite a bit of money on electricity this year from moving over to a heat pump, which is exciting to all the members of my family.
Great. Thank you, Maria. I want to go back to a pre-submitted question that we received from a number of constituents. Everett, if someone is on Medicare and pays more than $35 for a month's supply of insulin, what should they do? Will they be reimbursed for that overpayment?
Sure. Thank you, Kelsey. If a senior paid more than $35 a month for a supply of insulin, the Medicare Part D plan must reach the individual within 30 calendar days. If a reimbursement has not been received, my suggestion and recommendation would be that they should contact their plan and work with them. You can also find more information by visiting Medicare.gov or also calling 1-800-MEDICARE to talk to a counselor or a representative as well.
Great. And I just want to remind folks on the line, if you do have a question that you want to ask, please press 0 on your phones and we will make sure to get you into the queue. Next up, we have a question about prescription drug pricing from Michael from Malden. Michael, you should be on the line.
Hi. My question was related to the price of Ozempic that's upwards of $1,000 and that it's not currently covered by Medicare. Is there anything that's being done along with the other prescription efforts that are going on to alleviate that?
Thanks for calling.
I can take that.
Great. Thank you, Michael.
So that's an incredible question. So Ozempic is a diabetes management medication, and it's also an injectable medication, and is used in part with diet and exercise to control blood sugars and help control diabetes. However, it's not specifically an insulin product, so it isn't covered under the Inflation Reduction Act as far as the $35 per month cost cap. However, Ozempic itself is not excluded from Medicare if it is used for a medically accepted indication under Medicare Part D. Medicare Part D does not cover medications if they're used for weight loss. So if Ozempic is being prescribed specifically for weight loss, then unfortunately it would not be covered under Medicare. This was written into the law when Medicare Part D was first established. However, if Ozempic is being used to manage type 2 diabetes, it would be eligible to be covered under Medicare. It would just depend on the formulary of the specific Medicare Part D plan that you are covered by.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have Bo from Sudbury, who I believe has a question about both the healthcare and the energy provisions of the IRA. Bo, you should be on the line.
Hi, how are you?
Good, Bo. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I have a question first about my mom was on Medicare and she had the supplemental, and we had to take her to the hospital quite a few times from the house, and we still got a bill from the ambulance company even after the insurance and everything. I don't understand that. That was one. That's one question I have about that. How does that work?
Everett, I'm going to turn that over to your team.
I'm sorry. So the answer is, unfortunately, Medicare, if you have a Medicare, once you become eligible for Medicare and you have a supplement, there are still cost-sharing features of Medicare. I can't speak specifically about the ambulance service that was provided. If there was a copay for that, depending on whether your mother's deductible was paid before that happened. But it's not an all-inclusive program. That's why it's fantastic that she had or still has a supplemental to provide just as the name describes, supplemental coverage to her Medicare coverage. But I'm afraid there are still some costs involved depending on a particular case. Certainly, if you have questions about that, you can call 1-800-MEDICARE 24/7, and one of our customer service staff will be happy to go over, if it was a recent thing, be happy to, or not, can go over specific claims and sort of talk you through it.
Great, that's helpful. Bo, did you have a second part to your question?
Yeah, I was going to ask if the bill that they're talking about right now is going to have something to do with spraying those costs to people who have, problems with that.
Well, absolutely.
Problems. What if they do?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to help reduce the cost of premiums as well as bring down specific things like the cost of insulin. But I will send it back to Everett for more detail.
Yeah, Joe, can you provide any more detail in regard to that, please?
Yeah, so, unfortunately, every case is different. And certainly depending on the supplemental plan that you or your mother purchased for themselves, that sort of changes the cost sharing that's in place. And certainly there's state programs, as someone mentioned, one of the callers mentioned at the beginning of the program, that cost sharing through the state Medicaid program, or in Massachusetts, Mass Health, depending on someone's income, would help supplement those costs, specifically for ambulance coverage and things of that kind.
Great, thank you.
Fantastic. Our next question comes from Jeff from Belmont. Jeff, you are on the line.
Hi, thanks everyone, and thanks Congresswoman for putting this together. My question is, I'm a small business owner doing some innovative work on a number of different areas when it comes to digital, when it comes to organizations. And as a small business owner located in Massachusetts, how can I help bring some private sector innovation to impacting particularly the sustainability, climate, infrastructure end of things? Expertise not in healthcare particularly, but our mission is to help organizations who are helping the planet and helping our community.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you, Jeff, so much for calling and for the question. And part of what we tried to build into the Inflation Reduction Act, and especially around the energy and climate provisions, is leveraging the private sector. So I will let Maria fill in with more details, but thank you, and thank you for your focus of work.
Absolutely. We're always excited to hear about different business owners, and not to get all Senator Markey in here, but certainly Massachusetts is known for all of the great ideas that come out of here. I think he likes calling it the brain state. So within the Department of Energy, we have a couple of different programs that would allow for additional innovation within this work, one of which is through the Loan Programs Office. The Inflation Reduction Act appropriates about $12 billion in total for issuing new loans. And some of that work is financing all sorts of major projects, whether that is specifically for, say, tribes or for advanced technology vehicles manufacturing. So I can see a universe where you might consider partnering with some other small businesses or even some larger businesses in looking to potentially apply for some of these loan programs or some of the larger funding to kick off the great work that you're trying to do here. I would encourage you to check out the office's work. It's called Loan Programs Office. And it has some additional funding specifically for innovative clean energy programs, whether that is reinvesting in areas where there were existing infrastructure that is polluting, so that we would be able to continue to invest in those same communities moving forward. But it sounds like you have a lot of really great ideas and thoughts to bring to either clean energy or the healthcare system. And I think folks would be excited to partner and figure out how to best utilize your skills.
Great. Thanks, Maria. Our next question comes from Mary Beth from Framingham. Mary Beth, you should be on the line.
Hi. Thank you, Congresswoman, for organizing this question and answer session. I'm a retired federal employee, so I pay the premiums for Medicare as well as the premiums for it's a federal employees program under the federal government for my insurance, Blue Cross. So the question I have is, will these provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act also apply to federal employees? Reduce the additional premium we have to pay over and above the Medicare premium, and also with respect to prescription drugs?
Well, thank you for calling, Mary Beth, and thank you for your service to the government and Everett. I'm hoping you can give some detail to that answer for Mary Beth.
So, Mary Beth, thanks for that question. And certainly people should understand that even federal employees can be confused about what's available and what to do relative to their retiree products. All of the aforementioned Medicare benefits and reductions that we've noted under the Inflation Reduction Act are available to you. The costs of our although I'm not retired yet, I hope to be soon. The costs of your employer group plan, your federal policy, aren't impacted, unfortunately, by the Inflation Reduction Act. That wasn't part of that. But any of the aforementioned preventative services, any of those features that the federal plan certainly adds or combines with Medicare to provide those same services.
Fantastic. Our next question comes from JP from Waltham. JP, you're on the line.
Hi there. Good evening. Thank you for putting this together. I just have questions about whether the Reduction Act has any provisions with regard to energy prices. I know that we pay way more for electricity and gas in this state as compared to other states, and we're just wondering how to reduce this cost, and if we can get a seat at the table with some of the energy providers, because it's not that easy to reduce the cost, even when they say that we have some choices on which energy suppliers we can use. I'm just hoping that we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you so much, JP. Maria, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Excellent. So, JP, it sounds like you know a lot about energy choice and, of course, the retail competitiveness that we have here in Massachusetts. And while the Inflation Reduction Act doesn't address that directly, obviously that is something that is addressed by the State Department of Public Utilities, the DPU, who determines what the rates are going to be. I think there are lots of really great ways through the Inflation Reduction Act to overall reduce your home's specific demand that will ultimately reduce your bill. I think that's why we're strongly encouraging folks to take a closer look at some of these rebates for incredibly energy efficient air conditioners and clothes dryers, or when you're replacing your hot water boiler, or whether you want to do, or when you're replacing your hot water heater as well, because those savings really add up quickly. And I know it is hard sometimes to imagine that when you're making a big purchase, But I think this will allow for folks to better understand what the long-term energy costs would be compared to investing upfront in more efficient equipment, especially if you're going to get some sort of direct rebate or tax credit by investing in those more efficient appliances moving forward. But certainly, this is where I'll say, encourage you to talk to your state representatives as well, who really look at some of the work happening around those bills. And I know that you have a great one over in Waltham.
I also wanted just to mention, JP, and maybe Maria, you can expand on this, but there is $27 billion within the Inflation Reduction Act for a new competitive grant program that is really supporting the rapid development of low and zero emissions technologies. So while those savings may not be available today, we are really hopeful that this kind of large investment from the federal government and the $100 billion in new clean energy investment that has already gone out the door to the private sector since the IRA was signed are going to yield lower utility costs for consumers here in the Bay State. And Maria, I don't know if you want to expand on that at all, but I think that is really the power of this legislation, is going to be that investment and really using the private sector to be able to move out clean technology that can save consumers money faster.
Definitely, Congresswoman, and this is one of the things that the Department of Energy we're constantly trying to think, how will our investments, whether it's in the transmission system or whether it's in new solar generation or in EV charging, how is that going to ultimately catalyze and reduce the cost to consumers and make sure that we're catalyzing some of that private investment as well? Is it something where the technology needs to be more proven, and we have to make sure that that research and development work gets completed fully, and there's some testing that needs to happen? Is it something where ultimately it is economies of scale, where we need to just invest a certain amount in order to bring down the cost? We've certainly seen that over the past decade or two with the cost of, say, rooftop solar, which has absolutely plummeted from much higher rates early on. And so we're trying to make sure that all of the investments we as the federal government are putting in are being matched, if not exceeded, by private sector investments to ensure that we're ultimately helping to strengthen our electric system as much as possible and utilizing the federal government's dollars very wisely.
Wonderful. We have time for a couple more questions. We're getting close to 7 o'clock, but next up we have Eric from Cambridge. Eric, you're on the line.
Hi, it's Eric Houston from Cambridge. My question regards the federal incentives for solar installation in medium-sized condominium associations like mine, which is 57 units. If I'd like to, forgive me, I'm not sure what the question is, but I guess the question is, are there incentives available, and where should I look?
Thanks, Eric. Maria, do you have some information?
We do. And so, Eric, I don't know, you might have missed at the very beginning. I would encourage you to take a look at energy.gov/save. And there's some information for large communities like yourselves, for people who are renting, for people who own large buildings as well, to better understand what options are available, whether that's, getting $150 off a home energy audit, so that you can figure out where you can make more efficient choices. We've done that in our house and certainly have seen our bill go down significantly with very little cost to us. And in particular with solar, I know that Massachusetts as a state also has some great incentives as well, particularly on multifamily housing buildings, as well as getting the opportunity to invest in solar tax credits. If you're able to work at a community level, you'll be eligible for some of that investment tax credit of 30% also. So I encourage you to check out that website, and certainly happy to talk furthermore in the future and see if we can work with your specific situation.
Thanks, Maria. Just a couple of questions that we got from a number of constituents ahead of time that haven't been touched on yet tonight. One is, how can the IRA help folks purchase an electric vehicle if they're looking to do so?
Yes, this is certainly something that I hear as I travel throughout our district, a real interest in purchasing an EV, but also concerned about the sometimes very high price of those cars. And so, Maria, if you could talk about some of the incentives that are in the IRA to make EVs affordable.
Definitely. And what's pretty exciting about the Inflation Reduction Act is, for the first time, there's a credit for people who are purchasing used electric vehicles. It's exciting that there are electric vehicles on the market that are used, and you can get up to $4,000 per vehicle in tax credit for those used vehicles. And of course, if you decide that you want to buy new, that's $7,500 in tax credit as well. And in addition to that, there's a nationwide program for electric vehicle infrastructure that has been allocated out to states. And I know Massachusetts was very excited to get some of that funding to be able to put more electric vehicle charging stations across the Commonwealth. I think so that you can get from one end of the pike to the other in your electric vehicle and not have to worry or have any range anxiety about that. And I know there are additional incentives and interest who are interested in having that community level chargers as well. But for individuals, yeah, there's this great tax credit either for new or used vehicles.
Great. And I think we have time for one more question. And that question will come from Monica. Monica, you are online.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Monica from Milton. And I just wanted to know about the timeline for the rebates available and how to actually be able to schedule that with like contractor work so that we get the benefits of the cost for the project kind of like upfront rather than pay for the job and then wait for the rebates to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. This is a very frequent question as people are excited about what the Inflation Reduction Act offers, but also eager to get those rebates and be able to start making the energy efficient improvements to their home. So as Maria was discussing earlier, working with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and state government, DOE has just in the last few days put out some information for the states, and we are hoping that those rebates will be available in the beginning of 24. And Maria, I don't know if you have any further
I don't know if we lost the Congresswoman there briefly at the end, but Yeah, so the hope is that these programs will get up and running in early 2024, and that will be through the state. I would also note that you can start doing the home energy audit work a little bit earlier, and you can be eligible for that 30% tax credit up to $150 on the home energy audit, and you can do that anytime now before these rebates are yet available. So there's many steps that you can start to take even before the rebates are available to start to look at electrifying and making your home more efficient. And I know that Mass Save is usually pretty good about coming out relatively quickly. But at the same time, if you're excited about this prospect, you might want to give them a call and start that conversation with them so that you're really ready once the rebates are available. And I feel confident that the Healy administration will be shouting from the rooftops the moment that these rebates are available in Massachusetts. So I would keep your ear to the ground, and we'll make sure that, I'm sure the Congresswoman will make sure that everyone gets some of that information when they are available.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, I think we are right up at 7 o'clock now. So thank you everybody for joining us. And I will just turn it back over to Congresswoman Clark for some closing remarks.
Well, thank you, Kelsey, and to Maria and Everett, thank you for lending us your time and expertise and for all your work on behalf of the American people and specifically right here in Massachusetts 5th District. And to everyone who dialed in this evening and asked such great questions, thank you for joining us. If we didn't get a chance to answer your question, my staff will follow up with you in the coming days. And if you'd ever like to get in touch with my office directly, please don't hesitate to call us at 617-354-0292. Please know that my team and I are always here to answer the questions you may have and help you access the resources you may need. So have a wonderful night, and we will talk again to you soon. Thanks so much.
Please press 1 to leave voicemail.